Hi guys, this is Jason from 2 Reviews. Today we've got the Campfire Andromeda, and for $1,000, they're amazing. Okay, disclaimer before we start the review. I would like to say that I bought these from a guy, secondhand, and this review is completely of my own opinion. I'm not affiliated to Campfire Audio or anything alike. Okay, so we'll start off with sound. Overall, I think these sound quite great, especially if you like a brighter signature. And we'll start off with the bass. So the bass here, I would just say, if you're a bass head, probably just go off of this review. Like, this will not be for you. And one thing to note though, the Campfire Andromeda are incredibly sensitive to the source that they plugged in. So they're very sensitive to output impedance changes, and in general they are very sensitive, as in like if you're usually listening to a certain volume, you will probably have to go a couple notches down because these are very sensitive and get loud very easily. Plugging into a MacBook Pro, just the first step, the volume is too much for me, for me at least. Okay, now going to the bass. Now I will start adding this setup that I'm using for my reviews in the description. But for this review, I will have to explicitly mention that I am reviewing using the ES100, which has a very low output impedance, and I'm using the stock cable for your references because this Andromeda is very sensitive to source. And I think it's the only IEM that I hear a difference in cable, especially the bass. So this is putting that into context. This is how I perceive the bass. So the bass has a very small hump. It's very punchy. Mid bass is more present to me than the sub bass, but I think that's mostly because these are like balanced armature instead of the dynamic drivers that you usually get on IEMs. Of course, there's a benefit to using balanced armature in the sense that these have very fast bass. The bass doesn't linger too long, and if you want to hear every little detail that is there in the bass, you want to hear every note that is being struck, you will hear them with the Andromeda. And the similar trend will follow in the mids and the treble also. So now going to the mids are incredibly clear. They're very well separated. Male vocals and female vocals have quite a good weight, but I would like to say that to my ears, some female vocals, something like Eimer and such, and violins can sound quite harsh. I think this highly depends on the source of music that you're listening to, like whatever genre, and yeah, depends on the mastering also. And there's not much to say on the mid-range. I can only say that they sound amazing. It's hard to really describe it. Until you hear it, you won't really get it. There's a dog just barking in the background. Don't mind it. It's 3 a.m. in the morning. I have to finish this review quickly because I have to send these to Brian first thing in the morning. So yeah. Anyway, going into the treble. The treble, there's quite a bit of an emphasis. I think these are probably one of the most revealing revealing treble that I've heard on IEMs. And because of how fast this is, you can listen to something like Dragon Force. Cymbals do not become splashy. They don't become just a jumble of sound. And it's incredibly detailed and incredibly airy. This is probably the biggest selling point of the Andromeda and why a lot of people like it. It just sounds, it sounds spacious, it's big, and the treble contributes a lot to it. And unfortunately for me, I'm quite treble sensitive, and for me it's a bit too much. I cannot listen to the Andromedas for long periods of time. Anything above 45 minutes starts fatiguing my ears, especially if I'm listening to J-pop or any songs. Okay, now I'll start going to the soundstage, and as I mentioned the treble, the sound is incredibly airy, and soundstage, if this was the size of your head, the Andromeda would be slightly outside of your head. It's and with this big soundstage, it also emphasizes another part of the Andromeda, which is it has quite good imaging. I can pinpoint instruments to quite a good accuracy, and it's not that vague. I can and these are probably one of the IEMs which I can hear the sound to be a bit more in front of me. So this is something that I sometimes have an issue with in other IEMs. On some other IEMs, the sound I perceive just sounds like it's coming from the middle front part of my head. It's not really outside of my head. It's not in front of my head even. Not an issue with the Andromedas. They're wide, they're spacious. I can praise this all day regarding in that aspect. It's just amazing, and it has actual detail. So okay, now we've covered imaging, covered soundstage. Now we're going to build. I don't think I can say much more about the sound. It's just incredible. Now going to build. The build of the Andromedas, they're prominently metal. They have this like green anodization here, like it's aluminum. It's actually very nice, but the thing with Andromedas is that they scratch very easily, and they do have multiple versions of these. So this is the standard version, the pre-2020 version. This I believe is the version 2 because it has these new three-winged bolts, and they have these chamfered edges. So the Andromeda has had some revisions over the course of the years because on the initial launch, the edges of the shell, for a lot of people, they were quite sharp. So they've now smoothened it out. Okay, and they've also just revisited the bolts and all. And uh, just as a PSA, I would like to say that the Andromedas do have some fakes running around. So read up on Headfi if you're buying secondhand, especially if the seller doesn't sell it with the original box and papers. In my case, they sold it with the original box and papers, and I also had an authentic Andromeda that I could from a store, which I could compare to these, and yeah, they were identical. And further going to the build, I think the MMCX connectors, they kind of vary between use. So my the left MMCX connector is a bit more stronger than the right MMCX connector in my case, but this is a general downfall of using MMCX connectors. They're not exactly the most reliable detachable interface in my experience. If you interchange the cable a lot. If you don't, then it's fine. But if you do, MMCX usually has more issues, and yeah, they can get dust in between the connectors, and that will sometimes cause sound disconnects and all. Okay, now fit wise, these actually fit quite well into my ears. These I currently have the Azla Sedna Light ear tips. I believe these are the size MM or MS. I don't remember exactly. But as an FYI, the Andromedas have quite a big nozzle. So if you have smaller ear canals, you might have an issue. But the Andromedas don't really insert that deeply. So they don't insert that deeply. So if you can demo it before you buy it, don't just do that, and don't just write it off right away, because although the nozzle is quite big, it isn't really a deep insertion. If it were to be a deep insert IEM like the Shure SE215, then yeah, you would definitely have an issue, but this doesn't, I don't think this will be the case. Eartips in general, the comply, I think the best size for this nozzle is the TX400s, because that's also what they what eartips they come with in the packaging. Now, going to the cable has this sort of like, it has a metal wire on it, which you can use to just shape to your ear. I don't like having this sort of wire. Uh, I have to constantly readjust it on my ears, but that's mostly a personal preference. But they're quite comfortable because the cable isn't really thick, so I don't really have much issues with it. And it's but the cable is one issue with the cable is it's a bit microphonic. At least I would say that's quite microphonic. It's quite a bit stiff. It's stiffer than I thought it would be. Although it's thin, so it's as long as you're staying still, it won't really move about much. So unless you adjust the chin slider appropriately, you will hear quite a bit of microphonics from this cable. And the cable itself has this L-shaped 3.5 jack, which I absolutely love, because then I can plug it into my phone without putting too much strain on the headphone jack. I love it. And generally I think the cable feels good quality, and supposedly this cable is provided by Alo, which is a quite well known cable manufacturer. And same as the Andromeda itself, these cables, the Alo cables, lots of fakes are running around, and I don't actually have I don't have much information on how to identify the fakes in terms of cables. So just a PSA. Okay, now comparisons. So comparisons, I would like to compare this in terms of sound. I think these sound. I think these are probably the most comparable to the EX1000. So the EX1000, I have them here with me. And the EX1000, if you don't know, so they're a Sony IEM which are very well regarded in terms of detail. I think they're on par in terms of detail. And in frequency response wise, I think they're quite similar also. The biggest differing characteristic between the Andromeda and the EX1000 is the drivers. So the EX1000 is a dynamic driver, a huge dynamic driver by the way, compared to the Andromeda, which is just 5 BAs, which I forgot to mention this, but the Andromeda, although it has 5 balanced armatures, it doesn't have a conventional crossover. So it's physically tuned with using chambers, so it doesn't actually have a crossover like you would normally in multi-driver setups. So that's quite an interesting technology. Okay, so compared to the EX1000 sound-wise, I like the bass of the EX1000 more. It's a dynamic driver. Price-wise, the EX1000 are actually cheaper than the Andromeda. Quite a bit. Second hand right now in my area, you can get these for 300-400 bucks. But they're very hard to find. Very hard to find, because whenever it pops up into the online any marketplace, people just snag them. And there's a good reason why. I believe the EX1000 gives a better value than the Andromeda, especially if you're looking for technicalities. But I think the Andromeda are an easier listen. They're equivalent in terms of technical capabilities, but the EX1000 just has this treble that is it forces you to listen to the treble. It forces you to listen to the music in the EX1000, and the EX1000 just has a way bigger soundstage than the Andromeda, but that is because the EX1000 also doesn't seal quite well. So this is why I would actually prefer the Andromeda, aside from the fact that it has a less harsh treble, or a treble that doesn't try to kill you, because these have isolation and are still able to provide such a nice soundstage. You, there's usually a trade-off here. So something I usually observe with IEMs is that the less of a seal they provide, they will naturally have a wider soundstage. I think a very good comparison I think that I can give. Okay, I don't think it's a very good comparison, but some comparison I can give is earbuds versus IEMs. So earbuds are the types that like the Apple earpods that you see, you probably have seen at some point in your life. The Apple earpods don't seal, right? So they don't have these silicone ear tips. They just sit in your ear. They don't seal at all. If you use them, you will still hear everything around you. By default, earbuds have a bigger soundstage simply because they don't seal. Of course, this will also vary because of tuning and whatnot, but I'm generally speaking. The Andromedas, although they are an IEM and they seal actually quite well, so I like to use these when I have to actually focus on music because I want to listen to it. I am listening to a new track, I want to analyze it. They don't feel congested. They have actual soundstage. So do I think, in comparison, is it worth it to get the Andromeda compared to the EX1000? If you want to use it on the go, if you have to use it in a noisy environment, by all means get the Andromeda. If you can use it, if you can use your IEMs in a, like, not so noisy place, or you actually want less isolation, if you want to work in an office, for example, you want to hear people calling you or something like that, then you can get the EX1000s also, especially if you are more what's it called, you're more tolerant to treble. If you're less tolerant but you like a brighter signature, you can get the Andromedas. And I think that's the only comparison I can give right now. Other comparisons I can give, though I have not listened to these for quite a while, compared to the Solaris from Campfire also, the Solaris sounds a bit bloated to me. It doesn't sound as detailed as the Andromeda, and it doesn't have the same air. I'm not able to give a head-to-head comparison right now, so take it with a huge grain of salt. Okay, I think that does it for comparisons for now. If you want any more comparisons, you can leave them in the comments and I will try to reply them, get a unit, do a head-to-head, or do it based on memory. I do have some notes of IEM comparisons between the Andromeda and other things, but I don't want to make this review too long. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. As usual, I will leave what Brian thinks of these Andromedas right about now. Should appear on your screen. And yeah, like it if you liked it, and subscribe if you want more content. See you next time.